last week's message about finding yourself on the plateau, which can feel like stuck, obstacle, setback, etc., generated a lot of response from you guys. Thank you for that feedback. It indicated to me that there's quite a few of us who have noticed that maybe we're on one of these plateaus. And you found that the message last week about how that is sort of the natural progression of mastery or growth, you found that calming to know that you're not completely screwing it up necessarily. What it sparked is conversations with a bunch of you and a bunch of my clients about how, okay, this whole thing about how you've got a plateau followed by a quantum leap, followed by a plateau, followed by a quantum leap. You can't avoid that process. However, what you can do is make sure you're not stuck on the plateau, and you can shorten the amount of time that you're on the plateau, right? Life's a lot more fun, and you get where you want to get faster if you can not avoid, but shorten the amount of time that you're doing this, right? If you're doing this with a short leap up and then this, it just takes longer than it needs to. So this week and next week, we're going to be talking about the two major elements that are that you want to look at to make sure that you are spending as little time feeling stuck or plateaued as possible. This week, we're going to examine the foundation. Next week, I'm going to give you the secret sauce for acceleration and manifestation. So let's go. All right, so here's the foundation of shortening the time feeling stuck on the plateau. It's that you want to look at what are known as your lead indicators. Okay, I learned this concept. I mean, I'd kind of always known this concept, but I really learned it almost exactly a year ago when I had the opportunity to share the stage with a guy named Chris McChesney, who wrote a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution, which I would highly recommend. He talks about 4 things that organizations and people do who really execute, who really get the job done and grow. One of the things that he talked about was that those organizations have I believe it's the second discipline, is that they have a relentless focus on their lead indicators, right? In any system, whether it's a person or an organization, you have lead indicators and you have lag indicators. You have things that have to come first, and that if those things actually come first in the right way, then the output on the back end, your lag indicators, are going to come out. They're going to sort of take care of themselves, right? Here's a good example of this. One of my clients a few years ago was the management team of a glass factory. Weird thing. Here in Wisconsin, there was a glass factory. It was sort of a prime example of how you got to pay attention to your lead indicators and your lag indicators. I mean, this was literally a huge building and a team of people that what they did is they manufactured glass for solar window panes, okay? And this huge facility was basically a large kiln that you would put in raw materials, mostly something like sand and silicon. You would heat it up to a certain degree, and then you would flow it across an assembly or a production line, and out the other end would come this beautiful, flawless, clean, perfect thickness of glass, right? Lead indicators were the amount of raw materials that went in the one end and the temperature. Those were the two main lead indicators in this glass making, operation. The lag indicator was how much high quality, perfect glass came out the other end, right? So they had to be relentlessly focused on, is it the right mix of ingredients going in, and what's the temperature? Are we keeping it at the right temperature? Not too hot, not too cold. I mean, not too hot was still like 1,500 degrees, but like it had to be within a range. And if those two things, if those lead indicators were right, then the lag indicator of the end product would sort of take care of itself. You following this? Okay. So how does this apply to you getting unstuck and moving forward? Well, what I would want as a foundation of shortening this time on the plateau, I want you to make sure and you start with, okay, are my lead indicators right? And in your case, those lead indicators probably look like some volume and quality of effort. I know that most of you watching this are involved in building a book of business. You have a sales career. Selling or building a book of business is involved somehow. And there is a correct volume and quality of effort that goes into you producing sales results and therefore income, right? It probably looks like a number of meetings or appointments that you have to have. Maybe it's an amount of dials. Maybe you got to pick up the phone. Maybe there's certain marketing materials that need to go out in the correct amount and in the correct quality. I really want you to look at that first. Are you executing the correct amount and quality of effort? Okay? And I know that this can sound a little bit, I don't know, this maybe sounds a little oversimplified, but a bunch of my clients recently who are experiencing a slowdown, it's because they kind of unknowingly changed this lead indicator. They changed the amount or quality of their effort. Some went too much, some went not enough. I'll give you two examples on the extreme. We got one individual who I've referenced in this video series. Actually, both of these guys I've referenced in this video series, but they shall remain nameless to protect the innocent. We've got one guy who's hyper productive in the financial services world. I mean, like, he's amazing at what he does. And he finished 2020 and entered 2021 on this gangbusters run. And then what happened is, like, recently, just in the last couple weeks, he's like, man, I'm stuck. Everything's stopped. What's going on here? I feel like everything has slowed down. Well, what had happened for him is that in his process of doing an incredible amount of business to finish last year, he had done so much that he kind of like overloaded his whole administration team, and he almost kind of like broke his system. And so what he did is he sort of semi-intentionally lowered the amount of activity. He stopped running as many meetings with clients. He stopped making the number of phone. He lowered the amount of activity to a level below what's really optimal, and he didn't even realize it. On the other hand, and this is where I see people actually, this mistake I actually see more commonly than stopping, is doing too much. I've got another client of mine who had an amazing year in 2020, and somewhere around the end of 2020, we literally just figured this out. He was like, okay, well, we really want to crank this up. And so what we're going to do, he's in the insurance business, and they send out they send out quotes as marketing materials. And he's like, we're going to dramatically increase the number of quotes that we send out. And not by a little either. I mean, it was literally like by 60 or 70% that they amped up their volume of marketing effort. And somewhere in there, something changed about the quality of what was going out, and it stopped producing. It actually didn't make much sense. We're like, okay, well, you increase the volume of effort. Logically, it would make sense that you would then see an uptick. You put that lead indicator, you get more of that. Well, somewhere down the road, you should get an uptick then in the lag indicator, i.e. sales results. But I often find that what happened for my guy, JB, happens for a lot of people, that somewhere you put in too much effort and it fundamentally changes the quality. It turns, like, the effort that you're putting in becomes something different than it was when it worked. Is this making sense at all? I see this with professionals all the time. There is a level of effort that is too much, where you're putting in effort for effort's sake. See, top performance and mastering things is like a combination of putting one foot in front of the other with a clear direction of where you're going, but then but then maintaining a certain like looseness. All right. So when I'm talking about here, when I'm talking about focusing on the lead indicator of your volume and quality of effort, this is where I want you to check in with yourself. If you're on a plateau, if you're feeling stuck, is there any place that you have changed the amount or quality of effort that you're putting in? Did you stop? Did you start trying too hard? And did you change something, maybe unknowingly, that has turned your effort into something different? Okay? Now, if you have, great, fix that. If you're like, yeah, gosh, I took my dials from 30 a day up to 100 a day, you know what? My guess is that somewhere in the middle is probably where you need to be. What you're looking for, if you want to make this plateau time as short as possible and this moving up time as long as possible and enjoyable as possible, you've got to find the correct threshold of effort and quality of effort. Not too much, not too little. Look at that, and if you've got that as a foundation, awesome. Then next week's tip will really work for you in accelerating things. And if you realize that, hey, I'm not working hard enough, I'm working too hard, I've changed something, get back to the basics and find a pace that is challenging but sustainable for the long term and allows you to stay loose. If you're doing that, you got a good foundation for moving up really, really soon. I hope this is helpful, you guys. If what we're talking about here is confusing, if it's scrambling your brain a little bit, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to talk with you about how this fits for your situation exactly and help coach you out of it. Have an awesome week. I will look forward to talking to you from, like I said, a different locale. Shh, it's a surprise. Talk to you in 168 hours. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week.